Hey everyone! Real quickly before I start this video, I wanted to thank everyone for being so kind and loving. Since the last video, I've received so much love, and I am so grateful to have people that I can call friends and family, like the people that commented and watched the video last week. I did receive some hate, which is one comment, but in all honesty, her opinion doesn't matter, and I don't care what she has to say. And also one other thing before I start the video, I have chosen a name, and if you follow me on social media sites, you have seen the name that I've chosen. It's LorelaiAdeleDantzler. I'm not going to go into much detail about the name I've chosen, but I'm going to make another video probably next week going into detail about what it's like choosing a new name and the importance behind choosing a new name and why I chose the names that I chose. But anyway, let's get into this week's video. So for this week's video, I'm going to go into more detail about what it means to be transgender and what the word transgender means. I know I didn't go into much detail in last week's video. I didn't want last week's video to be longer than it was, so that's why I wanted to make a separate video going into more detail about what it means to be transgender and so forth. I'm actually going to be reading a few definitions from glad.org, I believe. I'll put the link in the description below so you can guys go and read them yourself if you want to. First, I'm going to start off with a few basics before getting into the meat of the topic. The first thing is gender identity. Gender identity is one's eternal, deeply held sense of gender. For transgender people, their own eternal gender identity does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. Most people have a gender identity of man or woman, or boy or girl. For some people, their gender identity does not fit neatly into one of these two choices. Unlike gender expression, gender identity is not visible to others. For example, before coming out, I identified as female, but I would present myself as male, so you couldn't tell that I was female by the way I looked. The next one is gender expression. Gender expression is external manifestations of gender, expressed through one's name, pronouns, clothing, haircut, behavior, voice, or body characteristics. Society identifies these cues as masculine and feminine, although what is considered masculine and feminine changes over time and varies by culture. Typically, transgender people seek to make the gender expression align with their gender identity, rather than the sex they were assigned with at birth. So, my gender expression is very female, even though I was biologically born male. And I identify as female, and my expression is very feminine. So, getting on to the more in-depth of this video about what it means to be transgender and what does transgender mean. The word transgender is an umbrella term for those whose gender identity or gender expression differs from what is typically associated with the sex that they were assigned at birth. People under the transgender umbrella may describe themselves using one or more of a wide variety of terms, including transgender. I don't know if I mentioned this in last week's video, but I do identify as transgender, but technically speaking, in the more proper terminology, I am technically a transsexual, but as I read the definition, you'll start getting to understand as to why I choose to identify as transgender and not transsexual. Transsexual is an older term that originated in the medical and psychological communities, still preferred by some people who have permanently changed, or seek to change their bodies through medical interventions, including but not limited to hormones and/or surgeries. Unlike transgender, transsexual is not an umbrella term. Many transgender people do not identify as transsexual and prefer the word transgender. It is best to ask which term an individual prefers, if preferred use as an adjective, transsexual woman or transsexual man. Some people just choose to identify as trans, which is used as shorthand to mean transgender or transsexual, or sometimes to be inclusive of a wide variety of identities under the transgender umbrella. Because its meaning is not precise or widely understood, be careful when using it with audiences who may not understand what it means. Avoid unless used in a direct quote or in cases where you can clearly explain the term's meaning in the context of your story. The next three definitions I really want to spend a little bit of time on. Being someone who's transgender, I know a little about what these mean, but those who are cisgendered, and for those who don't know what cisgendered means, cisgendered is someone who identifies as the sex they were biologically born as. And I, throughout coming out and coming to terms with being transgender, notice a lot of cisgendered people don't know what it means to be transgender female or transgender male, or what a crossdresser is. And that's, I feel like, a huge confusion with this whole being transgender thing, is people freak out because they don't understand what it is. For me, I feel like a lot of this fear comes from the unknown, and the only way to get over that fear is to educate yourself and learn what it means to be these things. Transgender man. People who are assigned female at birth but identify and live as a man may use this term to describe themselves. They may shorten it to trans man. Some may also use FTM, an abbreviation for female to male. Some may prefer to simply be called men without any modifier. It's best to ask which term an individual prefers. Transgender woman. People who are assigned male at birth but identify and live as women may use this term to describe themselves. Some may also use MTF, an abbreviation for male to female, and some may prefer to simply be called women without any modifier. It's best to ask which term an individual prefers. Now, this next one is the definition of cross-dressing or cross-dresser, and I oftentimes get often confused with a male who just likes to cross-dress. And since I identify as female, I don't view myself as cross-dressing. I view myself as dressing the clothing that fits appropriately with my gender identity and gender expression. Cross-dresser. While anyone may wear clothes associated with a different sex, the term cross-dresser is typically used to refer to heterosexual men who occasionally wear clothes, makeup, and accessories culturally associated with women. This activity is a form of gender expression and not done for entertainment purposes. Cross-dressers do not wish to permanently change their sex or live full-time as women. And it's more appropriate to use the term cross-dresser than transvestite. Transvestite is an old terminology for cross-dressing or cross-dresser, but is often very offensive in the way people use it. So if you're going to refer to someone who's a heterosexual male that likes to wear female clothing, it's best to call them a cross-dresser and not a transvestite. And this is an important thing that I would really like for you to focus on. If you get nothing else from this video, this is one thing that I really want to highlight. Transgender women are not cross-dressers or drag queens. Drag queens are men, typically gay men, who dress like women for the purpose of entertainment. Beware of the differences between transgender women, cross-dressers, and drag queens. Use the terms preferred by the individual. Do not use the word transvestite at all unless someone specifically self-identifies that way. These last few definitions are definitions I thought would be helpful just to throw in at the end of this video that you guys might find useful to know the definitions of, and be useful to help understand what it is to be transgender. Transition. Altering one's birth sex is not a one-step procedure. It's a complex process that occurs over a long period of time. Transition includes some or all of the following personal, medical, and legal steps: telling one's family, friends, and coworkers, using a different name and new pronouns, dressing differently, changing one's name and or sex on legal documents, hormone therapy, and possibly not always, one or more types of surgery. The exact steps involved in transition vary from person to person. And it's important that you talk to the individual, and sometimes you may have to avoid the phrase sex change, just because depending on the individual, different terminology can be offensive or cause gender dysphoria, which I'll go into detail with what that is in a few seconds. Talk about what SRS is. SRS is sexual reassignment surgery. It refers to doctor-supervised surgical interventions and is only one small part of a transition. Avoid the phrase sex change operation and do not refer to someone as being pre-op or post-op. Not all transgender people choose or can afford to undergo medical surgeries. I personally do prefer to go by pre-op transgender individual just because I'm open and honest, and I've dealt with enough hate in my life, and if me being a transgender individual is gonna cause you to hate me or not want to be in my life, I want to go ahead and be upfront and honest about that at the get-go, because I don't need any haters in my life. I'm done with that and I'm moving forward. Now, this last term is gender dysphoria, which, depending on the individual, can vary from easy to deal with to impossible to deal with. Depending on the day, for me it differs depending on the day. There's some days where I'm like, okay, this is fine, I can deal with it. There's other days where I can't even get out of bed. Why am I here? Why am I a human being? Why was I unfortunate enough to be born transgender? It is a struggle, and it's very different for each individual. Gender dysphoria. The definition on GLAAD.org is, in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association released the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which replaced the outdated entry gender identity disorder with gender dysphoria, and changed the criteria for diagnosis. The necessity of a psychiatric diagnosis remains controversial, as both psychiatric and medical authorities recommend individual medical treatment through hormones and or surgeries to treat gender dysphoria. Some transgender advocates believe in the inclusion of gender dysphoria in the DSM is necessary in order to advocate for health insurance that uncovers the medically necessary treatment recommended for transgender people. And real quickly, I want to thank the website for having these definitions up so people who are searching what their meanings are can easily find them. I will remember to put the link in the description if you want to go there yourself. And the reason why I'm reading from a website is so you can sort of tell I'm not making these definitions up, and there is some research behind it, and I'm not just throwing out random things that make absolutely no sense out for you guys. And there are many other different terms that other people use to identify themselves as. It's best to ask the person or the individual what pronouns they prefer to use, what gender identity they use to go by, and there's a wide variety of different gender identities and pronouns. Yes, there are different pronouns other than him and her and they. Pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoy and hope this is somewhat of an educational video. I really just read definitions off a website. I just wanted to be able to help clear up any questions you guys might have had from my last video and questions you might have just from general things happening in today's society. But thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments below. I will do my best to do a Q&A at some point in the future to answer those questions. As a transgender individual, I'm very open and love to get questions. A lot of people don't like to be asked certain questions, but I feel like part of the reason why I was born transgender was to answer the questions that so many people have. So I tend to not care if someone asks me certain questions. So if you have this question, leave them below. And if you feel like liking this video or sharing it, please do so. I would like to help spread some of the knowledge that people, I don't want to say lack, but would be helpful if they did know. Also, if you want to see more videos by me, please subscribe to my channel. And I will see you guys next week with another video. Bye!